In the midst of this global pandemic, how many of you have struggled to gather and meet with your friends as you once did? You may think that these barriers would cause problems for hobbies that rely on this kind of face-to-face interaction, but according to Liz Shu, the head of publishing and licensing for Dungeons & Dragons, online play for the game has increased by 85% over the last year, and revenue has increased by 35% on top of that, meaning that the game has not only been able to grow, but also create new ways to bring players together in spite of the unique challenges of our time. Speaking as someone who's run the game for almost a decade for players across the country and who has published my own content online on official platforms, I'm going to explain a little bit to you about this game that I love so much. If you've heard of Dungeons & Dragons, you're probably familiar with the sticky reputation it garnered in its past as an esoteric, unapproachable game for losers. But according to Wizards of the Coast internal statistics, more than 14 million players are currently enjoying the game worldwide, and that number continues to grow. So obviously there's something that's drawing these people to this game. For many, D&D represents a chance to escape, to step out of the everyday life and into an imaginary one. You may be able to commiserate times being as they are. In the midst of this pandemic, people can't go out and adventure on their own, so instead many are choosing to get together with their friends and adventure in a world of their shared imagination. Now hopefully I've piqued your interest, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about D&D, a little bit about what the game is, the game's history, and a little bit about its future. So, what is Dungeons & Dragons? For the uninitiated, it belongs to a category of games known as tabletop role-playing games. These are typically enjoyed by 2 to 4 players plus a dungeon master who functions as a kind of narrator, rule keeper who keeps the game running smoothly for the players. It is played with rule books like this one, which provide a framework where the players can express their creativity. It is a game typically played with dice of varying shapes and sizes, and it's typically played around a table, or at least historically, but this assumption has changed in recent times. Players gather together, albeit online or virtually, to portray fantastical characters, hulking barbarians, devious wizards, in a world of their shared imagination. So, now that you know a little bit about what the game is, let's talk a little bit about where it came from and how it's grown over time. So, we'll start with a little history. In 1974, the game was founded by Gary Gygax and David Arneson. It was initially intended as a companion to war games of the time, played with pieces on a board similar to Risk or chess. But with its eventual acquisition by Wizards of the Coast, a subsidiary of Hasbro, this coincided with a gradual transition from pieces on paper games to a more narratively oriented experience. The game. This is what has led to the game's success, setting it apart from many of its counterparts. Picture Stranger Things. The kids gathered around a table excitedly rolling dice and yelling and portraying their mighty wizards and warriors slaying dragons. The game has proven its staying power over more than 5 editions and more than 40 years, but it has exploded in popularity with the recent 5th edition coming out in 2014. With 5e came an effort to transition into a more online format, which has met great success. According to a D&D fact sheet by Wizards of the Coast, more than 7,500 unique broadcasters streamed their live games for more than 475 million minutes in 2017. And that number has only continued to grow. Shows like Critical Role and Girls Guts Glory have garnered millions of views and millions of dollars in advertising revenue and merchandise and crowdfunded campaigns. With the epidemic making traditional playstyles impossible, players have had to get creative with how they enjoy D&D. This leads into my final point, talking about D&D in the current day and where it's going into the future. YouTube, Twitch, podcasts, blogs, live shows, all of these digital formats have exploded in popularity in the last half decade. This information and entertainment content for Dungeons & Dragons continues to grow more and more as more people are introduced to the game. This has led to a broader and renewed interest as the game is more accessible than it's ever been. Efforts have been made to reduce barriers by both players and the creators, seeking to make the game more diverse, more inclusive, and more welcoming, and to lower some of the cost and content barriers to entry that have been present in the past. D&D has struggled with a reputation as a game for men, but efforts have been made, especially recently, to combat this misconception. Wizards of the Coast reports that currently 38% of their players are women, and that number also continues to grow with time. Third-party platforms have emerged in the midst of this pandemic. Services like Roll20 and Foundry seek to allow players to engage with the game online as seamlessly as they could around a table with their friends. These too will surely only improve over time and intend to be useful and be enjoyed even after the end of the COVID pandemic. So, to recap, today I've talked about what Dungeons & Dragons is, where it came from, and where it seems to be going. For those of you familiar with the game, I hope I've been able to teach you something. And for those of you unfamiliar, I hope that I've piqued your interest, because the game is more accessible than it's ever been, and if you're thinking of giving it a try, there's no better time than now. Thank you for your time.